funny.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Hope y'all are enjoying your time behind bars. My name is not Asian Psycho, aka ToaSniper98. The real one got abducted by some lolly eating pancakes and flinging tentacles out of keyholes. You can tell because he never uploads these videos within 3 months of each other. So slap my ass and call me fake. I'll try to do my best replacing him in the meantime. Today we'll be taking a very quick look at that lolly I just mentioned, Abigail Williams. Emphasis on quick, because any longer than that and we'll all be put on a list somewhere implying that we aren't already. Actually, that doesn't matter. Aniplex is already keeping track of everyone who's ever rolled on her banner this week anyway. No, but for real though, the actual reason why I want to make this video quickly is because Christmas 3 is right around the corner from now. I hope y'all are ready to grind that shit. What the fuck do you mean you only have 30 golden apples, you fucking casual? Johnny Bravo's long-lost daughter is a 5-star filthy gaijin, who's the first of her kind introduced with the Salem chapter of EOR. She's actually a very interesting servant from a gameplay perspective, but y'all love your FBI and lolicon memes too much to see her that way anyway. She's a hybrid support foreigner whose usefulness scales higher the less stuff you have on your account. She's basically a super strong starter unit who can carry her ass in the early game, which isn't surprising because somehow she has B-fucking rank strength as a servant, until you ditch her ass in the future because you have better and more specialized servants to work with later on. You'll notice that I chose the term hybrid support to describe Abby here, and for those of you who watched my videos throughout the how-to series, you may recall that I typically use the term hybrid DPS instead. Servants who I describe as this hybrid DPS thing usually have offensive kits, but have some support skills to give them some party utility. Abby is the opposite, because her kit is mainly support and her foreigner class only gives her true class ADV against berserkers, but you can still use her as a DPS too if the situation calls for it. Let's start off by focusing on Kingdom Hearts Simulator's support roles, since that's what I've emphasized. All of her skills are support, and her first skill gives her 10% charge every turn for 3 turns, and increases the party's MP damage by 30% also for 3 turns. So in case you want to know where Tamamo stole her first skill buff from, this is where she got it. Recall that MP damage buffs aren't exactly common in this game, and they certainly don't last for 3 fucking turns at that. Abby gets the distinction of being the first servant in the game to not only have a 30% MP damage buff, but also have it last for 3 turns. And it's a goddamn AoE buff too, because she wants bacon on her frickin' pancakes and eat it all too, I guess. But to be fair, she probably saw Moriarty's second skill, thought to herself, I can do better, and came up with this one. So I guess Tamamo stealing her skill here isn't so bad. Lockpicking Simulator's second skill is both a terror and defense debuff rolled into one, and it's also an AoE skill. 50% chance to stun every turn for 3 turns and reduces their defense by 20% for the same duration. Again, Abby looked at Caster Gills' terror skill and thought, I can do better, and came up with this one, but to be fair, it's not that hard coming up with a better skill than what he's got anyway. And her third skill is a charge drain and 20% attack debuff for 3 turns, but unlike her other skills, this one's single target only. I like to think that she tried stealing this from Kiara, but couldn't quite do it somehow. Whatever that implies is up to your imagination, you filthy degenerates. So what these skills mean together is that Aunt Jemima is a flexible support with a huge variety of utility, just like her pancake flavors. Defense debuff, attack debuff, charge drain, sustained stun, charge gain, and MP damage. She's got all of this by herself when most servants don't even have more than 1 or 2 of these at a time. But wait! There's more! In addition to all this utility, Abigail also has buff removal and at least a 30% crit chance debuff tied to her single target MP, which is basically every tentacle dojin ever summarized in about 10 seconds. And she stole this too from Amakusa because her buff removal mechanic also happens first before her MP's damage, meaning that if it does enough damage, nothing's gonna save you with the exception of Cs that have guts effects. Hopefully none of you found that out the hard way. Truly, this lolly really can fit so much utility in her. Okay, maybe that meme isn't quite appropriate here. So the general picture with IHOP Lolly is that, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, she's more useful the less stuff you have on your account. While that's certainly true of any SSR in the game, and none more so than Whodunit, of course, Abigail is this more so than others simply because of the sheer volume of utility that she can bring. She's particularly amazing for free-to-plays or casuals who don't really play a lot and or just don't have a lot of stuff on their accounts, like lots of high-level and high-skill servants or good CEs or whatnot. When they're going through story fights, for example, all of Abigail's skills are relevant and applicable, making their job much easier when she can just smack everyone with all sorts of tentacles, debuffs, while giving her teammates a few friendly tentacles to play with too. Wait, that didn't come out right either. And perhaps most notably, Berserker bosses in story are oftentimes the nemesis of free-to-plays or beginner players. Since Zerks are effective against almost everyone, it's sometimes hard for them to come up with effective counters for those fights, since they're not likely gonna have beefed up SSRs to handle them. Abigail is more or less the lottery ticket to bypass the Berserker bosses of the game, minus God Juna of course. Since she's a foreigner with true class advantage against them, she's a top tier choice for free-to-plays or beginners to use against Zerks, though there's another foreigner literally right around the corner who might have something to say about that. She can also act as a DPS too when needed, since she has her 30% MP damage buff, defense debuff, buff removal, over 12k attack rating, and neutral damage to almost all other classes in the game, except alter egos. Foreigners have Archer class star weight too, so while she doesn't have a star weight buff of her own proper, you could still use her as a crit servant with the right supports or the right CEs. But with all this utility and flexibility, just like how she loses her clothes with every ascension stage, there comes a price. While Abigail Lincoln has tons of offensive utility, she has very little defensive utility like evades, invulns, guts, or just standard defense buffs. Her own HP rating at 13,770 is definitely on the lower end of the SSR HP spectrum, though it's not the lowest, so if you don't also bring someone who can provide defensive utility, she can be prone to getting turned into pancake mix fast if you're not careful. She also doesn't have her own dedicated damage steroid either, like a mana burst, and as valuable as her MP damage buff is, it only applies to her NP, so her standard face card damage might not be as high as you're hoping, despite her 12k attack rating. And on the subject of her MP, her raw MP charge gain stat is horrendous at 0.25%, though she does have an Emiya deck to offset that, probably because Redman makes her pancakes every day. And even then, her deck means that she can't bust her Brave Chain, which further limits her damage output. And while her skills themselves are strong, their cooldowns aren't. They're all 9 to 7 turn cooldowns, so once you use them, don't expect to get them back for a while. She does have a hilariously low 7% death rate, which is the lowest death rate I've personally ever seen on a servant so far, though I wouldn't be surprised if there was another servant with an even lower one. But anyways, this could mean that she's an option against enemies who tend to insta-kill a lot, and that kinda makes you wonder how different the King Hassan quest back during Nerofest would have been if we had Abigail back then. She also has some pretty interesting passives, the Foreigner exclusive Existence Outside the Domain, which gives her 2 stars every turn and 12% debuff resist. I guess this helps with whenever you want to use Abby as a crit Foreigner if you want to set her up that way. And she does have Insanity, which is a free permanent 8% buster buff, and Divinity B, so at least it's something she has to work with for her MP other than her first skill. But perhaps Lolly Pennywise's biggest flaw is that for all the utility and power she brings to your table that aren't bacon-topped pancakes, she ultimately will likely be replaced by other servants as your account gets stronger over time, at least as far as late game or end game content is concerned. FGO is the type of game where because counterclassing and double damage is a thing, you generally want servants who specialize against taking down certain enemies as your DPSs depending on your quests, and while Abby does also have a ton of utility to go along with it, unfortunately she's not quite big 4 tier either, and since she's stuck as a filthy gaijin with class ADV against only berserkers, against whom literally everyone else in the game also has class ADV, she gets phased out as a potential DPS there too if you have stronger options available. And while I understand that this kind of late game viability drop-off tendency more or less applies to most servants who don't fit in with the current Scotty meta in JP right now, it's especially rough on Abby, and the fact that her Bob Ross colleague exists doesn't exactly help matters either. This is why I've emphasized throughout the video that she's a great pickup for anyone who's either just started out on the game or just doesn't have a huge variety of leveled servants to choose from, and unfortunately the inverse is also true. She won't really benefit whales like me or players who've already been playing for a long time and thus have well-established rosters to work with. Well, unless you're a Facebook whale, then she'll still be very useful to you with all those level 1 servants and skills you have, I'm sure. She can still find use as a versatile buffer and debuffer maybe, but for legacy players that's all she'll really amount to unless you specifically go out of your way to head pat your very own pancake lolly every day and use her as your dedicated DPS of sorts or something. Still, despite all the doom and gloom that I've said about her, let's not downplay the sheer versatility that Lolly Mikolash has to offer. offer. You can still use her as a general DPS, either as an MP spammer in an arts team, or as a crit servant, which turns her into an MP spammer anyway, or as a hybrid support who can use her MP mainly as a buff remover, or as a dedicated support focused on using arts chains with her Emiya deck and providing crit stars with 2030. Basically, any way you want to deploy your tactical tentacle powered FBI missile, you can probably pull it off. If you want to use Abby as a DPS though, make sure to cover for her weaknesses, so give her healers, defense buffers, and debuff removers. While she probably did steal a skill from Abby, and despite the fact that Abby's MP is not arts, Fluffy Tails can still take good care of your precious Tanjobi girl with heals, arts chains, MP charge, and skill cooldowns, something Abigail would very much so appreciate. In fact, you might as well just go full whale mode and run Taumo, Merlin, and Abigail for both arts and buster memes. Why argue about which meme is better when you can just rock both? Perhaps the most fitting teammate for Abigail though is Media Lily, since her Bond CE is, well, infinite pancakes, I don't know. Memes aside though, she can still be good with her on-demand burst heals, debuff removal, and debuff removal resist whenever that's relevant. And as for CEs, she can also use a wide variety of them depending on what you want her role to be. Damage CEs for DPS, maybe Sumo, or First Sunrise, or Aerial Drive, or something else buster related to help her NP damage. Or a crit related CE like Lude Bazette or Gachi Sans, or Victor if you want both general damage and crit damage. Give her sustained CEs like HP regen CEs if you don't feel like giving her dedicated healers. Naked Priest if you want to give her more defense, though I'm gonna have to call the lolly police on you if you do. Or even a 2030 to pretend like you have a limit broken one. Her own Bond CE isn't that great on her though. Normally a 30% MP damage buff is quite nice, but it isn't as great when Lolly Tien has her own 30% MP damage buff already. That, and why the fuck does she have triple insta-kill immunity when her death rate is one of the lowest in the game already? I guess if you really wanted to make sure she didn't die to insta-kill, it's nice, but otherwise just go with something else. So to wrap up, the FGO subreddit's public enemy number 1 is an incredibly versatile, jack-of-all-trades kind of servant with a unique class and major emphasis on support with the ability to go DPS when the situation calls for it, sort of like what I described Padoru Bride to be. She is truly a lolly of the people, being much more useful to the poor and destitute masses, and being not as useful to the whale bourgeoisie. But please don't give her a bottle of vodka just because of that. Anastasia's gonna be pissed if she finds out. And daily reminder too that somehow Delightworks thought that turning an 11-year-old Caucasian girl into a vessel of an outer god that turned her into an unofficial mascot of Tentacle Grape and then named her as Foreigner was a great fucking idea. Filthy gaijin indeed. And Public Servant's announcement to keep her in her first ascension stage so that she stays a good girl, that way she can eat all the triple stack mega fluffy maple syrup, cranberry, and bacon top pancakes that she wants. Or at most her second ascension stage if you insist on using her keyblades, but we all know what you're really after. And that's all you need to know about...
Whoa, yo. Hello, my ragtime pal. Hey, hey, you finna die, baby. Like a chicken and bitch.
Thanks for watching, y'all. Though I didn't know jails gave free Wi-Fi to prisoners nowadays. Next video is on the superior Rinface Ereshkigal. Changed my mind. Deuces.
ないから